Welcome to H2K Infosys. H2K Infosys is a e-verify business based in Atlanta, Georgia, United States. We provide 100% job-oriented, instructor-led, face-to-face, true live online software training programs. It also includes access to cloud test lab with software tools. We provide live project for you to work on. We also provide assistance with mock interviews, resume preparation and review, and job placement assistance. H2K Infosys is trusted by so many students across the world. H2K Infosys provides world-class services in IT training with real-time project work for corporates and individuals, special IT training for MS students in the United States, software design, development, QA manual and automation, performance testing and maintenance, IT staff augmentation, job placement assistance, and tech support.
Here you can see that I can write within our scriptlet itself the counter value, and then I'm incrementing the counter value, and after that I'm trying to print the counter value. Let us execute this one. Number of client requests 1. I'm hitting one more time. Still the value doesn't get changed. So how many number of client requests I'm receiving? See, the JSP got deployed onto the container. So that means it is active and it can serve any number of client requests. But here what happened was, you are seeing that the value of counter is not getting incremented. The reason for that is, see, your JSP, it contains only once, and it will be available as a single resource onto your container. That means only one servlet will get deployed onto the container. But whatever the code that you are writing within your scriptlet, the scriptlet code will be specified within your service method. So currently I have written this code. Go and verify your servlet code, service method. So whatever code that I have written, it was available within my service method. So that means whenever a separate thread got created for a client request, this is just like a local variable, and the local variable will get initialized to 0 for each and every client request. Normally local variables, anyway, they are going to create for each and every client request because their service method has completed. So that means this case, declaring the variable at scripted level, it won't work for our case. Our case is we just want a shared variable for all the threads, so that whenever a client request has received and a thread got created or allocated, we want the counter variable to be incremented. But if I have specified the counter variable within my scriptlet code, it will be just like a local variable, because whatever the code that I have mentioned within my scriptlet, they are just like they're going to specify within my service method itself. But what I'm expecting, I want the variable to be declared outside the service method. That means I want an instance variable for my servlet or JSP page. To declare instance variables for a JSP page, you need to use declaration stack. And the declaration stack will be specified by using percentage, not symbol, and you'll specify all your declarations. So whenever you have declared a variable like this, so currently I'm declaring the variable and I'm performing the scriptlet code here. So here, this is my declaration, and this is my scriptlet code increment for each and every client request. And finally, I'm printing the value of counter. Let us go and execute this one. So now you can see that the client requests are getting incremented. Sorry, the counter value is getting incremented because the variable is shared between the threads. If you take a look at the generated code for that, you can see that the counter is getting incremented, but the declaration resides outside the service method. This was available at this level, which means this is just like an instance variable and shared between all the threads. So whenever you want to declare an instance variable, you will go for declaration tag instead of specifying them within your scriptlet code. In between the JSP tags, we have discussed about implicit objects. Implicit objects are nothing but objects that are created by your container and make it available to your JSP page. That means here within your service method, you can see that there are several objects that are declared, and once after that, these objects are getting some values or getting these references or getting the actual objects from the memory by using some kind of coding. So that your container knows that these objects are available during your runtime. That's why it is automatically providing to you as an implicit object to your JSP page. There are several implicit objects available. The first one is HTTP Servlet request object. The reference variable for that is request HTTP Servlet response. See, these objects we have already used within our Servlet code. Request and response object we have already seen within our Servlet code, and also Servlet context, which is nothing but application level, Servlet config, which is your config parameters, and in the same way, one more important one is out object. The out object is derived from JSP writer, just like how you have the print writer for your Servlet code. JSP writer is used to send the information or to display the content onto the front end. There is one other important one, which is HTTP session, and the reference variable for that is session. We'll discuss about this one later. And one more is page context, which is nothing but your page context reference. Of all these seven implicit objects, most of us are familiar with us, because other than HTTP session, page context, we already know about all these 5 objects. We have seen about Servlet context, Servlet config, request and response, and JSP writer as well, which is out object. Session we are going to deal with in next session probably, and page context, which is used to get the references for other objects. So that means by using page context, there are certain methods available. Get request object, which will provide you the request object. Get session object, which will provide you the session object. Get application object, which will provide you the application context level objects. Normally, the purpose of page context is to refer to the variables within your page itself. Normally, page context, we won't be going to use that. Whenever we are going to write some custom tags, then only we will go for page context. So here also you can see that page context dot get servlet context page context dot get servlet config get session get out. So by using page context, we are able to retrieve all our other implicit objects. That's the reason I'm able to access out.println method previously by using our scriptlet code. So your JSP knows that whenever you put out, it will provide you all the methods. Your Eclipse will provide you all the methods because out is an implicit object which is available to your JSP page. In the same way, you can use request object as well, and also response object as well. So now that we have seen how to send the data or how to retrieve the data from the JSP page, we can modify our servlet code, and instead of writing the HTML code within our servlet, I will just forward the request to my JSP page, and my JSP page will take care about displaying the information. What do you call? Yeah, expressions, correct, Jitin. So currently within my date servlet, I'm preparing the HTML response. Now I'm not going to prepare my HTML response. We'll discuss about that, Vijay, later, but that requires some additional knowledge. So currently I'm receiving username and password from my HTML file, and once after that I just want to send this information to my JSP page, or I want to forward this information to my JSP page, which will display the username or which will display a tag specified as welcome to the user with username. We have specified about request.get parameter, the get parameter which is used to retrieve form level parameters. And within your request itself, there is one other which is request.get attribute. The get attribute or set attribute which is used to set some attribute for your next JSP page. Even with your JSP also, you have the request and response objects. So just like you have seen here itself, your service method consists of request and response objects. So that means your JSP page will also receive some request and response objects. If at all if the container creates, that's fine. But currently in our case, I just want to forward the request from my servlet to JSP page. So that means the request and response will be created by ourselves. So while sending the request to the JSP page, I can set some additional information by using my request object, and the JSP can retrieve that information and display it to the display it to the client. So from servlet, I just want to set some information. For that one, I need to use a method called set attribute. And the set attribute consists of two parameters. The first one is name of the parameter, and the second one is actual value. So currently, whatever the username that I have received from the front end, I'm just setting it with a name called UN. This name will be used on my JSP page to retrieve the parameter value, because I can have any number of parameters, request or set attribute, PWD, and password. So currently you have set two attributes here, and from your JSP page, if you want to retrieve, let us say, percentage. So I have an implicit object called request, and I can go for get attribute method, and the get attribute method accepts a parameter, and currently I want to retrieve username. If you don't want, you can just go and write equal to symbol. Welcome user. I'm going to comment this one or delete this one. Welcome user, and I have appended request.get attribute UN. So now from my date servlet, I need to pass the request to the JSP page. Previously, I have the out.println methods, which will be going to display directly to the front end. But currently, I don't want to write out.println from my servlet itself, and I just want to forward the request to the JSP page itself. For that purpose, you need to use another object or another class, which is request dispatcher. The request dispatcher, which will take request from client and then forwards it to a resource. The request dispatcher object, it will also created by your container, and it will be available to you by using request object. So your request object has access to request dispatcher. Your request dispatcher is nothing but which will take a request from a client. So currently your servlet itself will be a client for your request dispatcher object, and it will forward the request to a resource. Your resource can be either it will be a servlet or JSP page. Once you have specified the resource details, your request dispatcher has access to all the resources. So what it will do is it will simply pass the request to the JSP page by specifying the request and response objects, whatever that you have mentioned within your servlet code. Your request has access to request dispatcher object that will be specified by calling a method called getRequestDispatcher, and it accepts a parameter which is nothing but your resource details. So currently, what is your resource? Counter display.jsp is your resource. The getRequestDispatcher returns a request dispatcher object. So currently, you got a resource as well, and you got a wrapper as well. And once after that, the last step that you are supposed to do is you need to forward the request. You need to forward the request to your request dispatcher, and it also accepts two parameters. First one is request object, and the next one is response object. Once you got the resource, you are asking to pass the control to the resource with request and response objects. Ultimately, any kind of resource needs request and response objects. That's why we have created from our own. And before sending the request and response objects, here you are updating your request and response objects, only request object, and you are adding some additional information that is required for your JSP page. So currently, I'm executing my HTML file once again. Restart the server. See, this is my old code. The login.html, it will traverse to, I'll change this one. It will traverse to date servlet, and the date servlet doGet method will get invoked, and within doGet I'm retrieving the request.get parameters, and after that I'm setting those two as form parameters, and I'm forwarding the request to counter_display.jsp page. So within my counter_display.jsp page, whatever the request attribute that was available, I'm just retrieving it by using getAttribute method. I'm displaying it to the client, specifying that, hey, welcome user, username. Redeploy one more time. Sometimes you will get Tomcat restart errors or Tomcat server deployment errors. No need to worry about that, because your Tomcat is just like a low-level container and it was not able to handle all the requests properly. So this is my login page. Verify whether it got updated or not. Still it is login.html. This didn't get changed. Let me delete it manually. Start. Yeah, now it got updated. So here I'm entering the username and password. This page was designed by using CSS. I ask you guys to learn about CSS and JavaScript as well. So for better design, we need CSS. So enter username Steve. Click on submit button. What happened? Date servlet. Let me execute it outside our Eclipse. So here you can see that welcome user Steve. Some problem with my Eclipse, I just need to restart my Eclipse. So here you can see that doGet method called. So whenever it has received within your doGet method of date servlet, we are having that statement. And once after that, we are setting the parameter username received Steve, password received Steve. After that, we have set both the variables, and we are using request.getRequestDispatcher, and we are forwarding the request and response objects to the next resource. But here you can see that whenever I'm submitting the request dispatcher, what it is doing, the request dispatcher works on the server side. In the sense, once your servlet has received the request, your servlet will be responsible, nothing but your server side will be responsible to forward the request to another resource. That is nothing but your browser URL, it won't change at all. So here you can see that previously the browser URL was this one. Once you have submitted, when you click on submit, first it will go to date servlet, and from date servlet, it was supposed to traverse to counter display.jsp page. That was happened, and you can see that the output of counter display.jsp onto the front end. But at the URL level, you didn't see any change for your .jsp file. You are still seeing that only at the servlet level. The reason for that is your request dispatcher works on the server side. In the sense, let me show you one diagram. So whenever a servlet container passes the request to servlet, the servlet, within our servlet, you have mentioned that get the request dispatcher object from the request. We got that one. And after that, we are using same request and response objects, and we are forwarding the request to another JSP page. So we, in the sense, on the server side, this will be taken care by your servlet or container itself. So forwarding the request to the next resource will be taken care by your container or your servlet itself. There is no interaction to the client. This was done from this side to this side. No interaction back to the web browser or anything. So that means your web browser won't be able to identify whether the request was handled by the same servlet or the response was forwarded to another resource or not. There is one other way, which is, I'm commenting this one. The next method is send redirect method. The send redirect method which works on browser side. So the request dispatcher, the send redirect is also used to forward the request or response to the next JSP page. But the request dispatcher works on the server side, whereas the send redirect works on browser side, which means from here you will specify that from here we'll specify to go to a particular resource. That's what we have done with respect to request dispatcher as well. For send redirect also we'll specify the same, but here the request will be transferred back to the web browser, and from the web browser will then query the JSP page or the resource, whatever that you have specified, and it will again send a request to your container. So in the sense, here request dispatcher which works on the server side. The server will take care about forwarding the request to next URL, which is nothing but your JSP page. But in case of send redirect, your server won't involve, and your server will specify where exactly to forward the next request, nothing but your JSP page. Then your web browser will pass the request or response to that particular JSP page. But the problem with this approach is whenever you have sent a request back to the web browser, that means during the next request, whatever the request and response objects that are available, they are gone. They are already destroyed, and whatever the request that was received to the container, that will be just like a new request, and your container will create a separate request and response objects, and whatever the data that you have persisted with the previous call, they are all destroyed and they are not available to your current JSP page. To make use of send redirect, you need to use response, just like how you have specified within your request.get request dispatcher, specify in the same way, and no need to do any forward kind of stuff also. Response itself understands that send redirect, it was supposed to pass the response back to the browser itself, and the browser will make use of this JSP page as a next call, and it will submit the request by using counter display.jsp. Then your container, whenever it has received a request from a client, the container understands that it was supposed to create a request and response objects. What if two or more JSP pages are accessing same Java file, since we are hard coding the JSP file name in Java? Those we'll discuss in later. So we are at the starting point, so we just need to have some time to understand those concepts. So currently I'm at the login.html level. I'm entering the data as Steve. Take a look at the browser URL, submit. Now when you have submitted, you can see that the URL, it got displayed as counter display.jsp file. And you can see that your request attribute, whatever that you have set within your within your servlet code, now it was not available. And when you are accessing the request.get attribute of null, currently your browser has created a new request and response object and then given to your JSP page. So that means your UN or password, whatever that you have set with respect to the old request and response object, they are not available, and a fresh request and response objects are available to your JSP page. That means whenever you are accessing a parameter which is not available, it will return a null value. But here you can see that the counter display.jsp file, which means your browser has asked to go to that particular URL for the container or server. Currently with request object, you are not able to set the parameter. There are some other ways where you can make use of those objects and set the parameters and make it available to your JSP page as well when you are using response.send redirect. Normally these two are just like interview questions. You need to answer like, what is the difference between request dispatcher and send redirect? Request dispatcher, it works on the server side, and send redirect, it works on the browser side. The next thing is, whatever the request and response objects that are available within your current object or within your first request, those will be forwarded directly to your next resource. Whereas for send redirect, the request and response objects will be created again by the container because it works on the browser side, and whatever the request and response parameters that you have set with respect to the first request, they are not at all available.
So many of our students have given testimonials on how our training programs are. You will find them on kudzu.com and on our website H2KInfosys.com. On our website H2KInfosys.com, you will also find more detailed information on who we are, the courses that we offer, what each course covers. Also, if you're interested in a demo program, please register on our homepage on the left-hand side. Just give us more information about yourself and we will send you a link for a demo class. The demo class is absolutely free. Experience our commitment by just attending an orientation workshop at no cost. Our team of faculty and advisors are here to guide you with the right information. If you still have more questions, please feel free to call us. call us at 770-777-1269. This is a United States number. If you're calling from the UK, call us at 020-337-17615. You can also email us at training@h2kinfosys.com or h2kinfosys@gmail.com. Thank you for watching our videos. We wish you a great career in information technology.